Go and tell your prophet Muhammad to save these prisoners from me. Now think about that for a second. That incredibly arrogant, inciting taunt was delivered by a ruthless commander named Reynold of Chatillon. And it didn't just insult a faith. It triggered a massive, literally empire-shaking retaliation. It's the exact spark that ignites the historical source we're unpacking in today's. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're doing an impartial breakdown of a deeply detailed historical source, originally presented in Hindi and Urdu, that chronicles a millennium of conflict, conquest, and reconquest over one of the most revered cities on Earth, Jerusalem. We're going to unpack the fascinating narratives, the legendary figures, and the repeating cycles of history presented right in this account. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. We've structured this explainer into 6 clear phases, starting with early history and conquest, moving into disunity and the Crusades, the terrifying Hashashin threat, the rise of Saladin, the Battle of Hattin, and finally, Jerusalem retaken and its legacy. Starting us off, Section 1, Early History and Conquest. Charting the transition from the Romans to the Umayyads. So the source roots the Islamic connection to Jerusalem deep in history, first noting the Prophet Muhammad's night journey before the initial military push. And things escalated really rapidly here. In the 630s, the first caliph, Abu Bakr, begins pushing back the Romans. By 637, the second caliph, Umar, achieves something totally remarkable. He accepts the surrender of Jerusalem without a single drop of blood being shed, and he builds this simple wooden Al-Aqsa mosque. But as you'll see, this unity doesn't last. By 656, the First Muslim Civil War erupts, and it's only decades later, amidst all this ongoing instability, that the Umayyad dynasty takes firm control, with Abdul Malik completing the iconic Dome of the Rock in 691. Which brings us right to Phase 2, disunity and the Crusades, a fractured empire. The source makes a very specific argument here, and it's absolutely crucial. Internal splintering directly caused the catastrophic loss of their holy city. Basically, with the collapse of the Abbasid Caliphate, rival Muslim empires, specifically the Fatimids and the Seljuks, just started fighting each other relentlessly over Palestine. It's a classic historical lesson, right? By fighting amongst themselves, they weakened their own walls and left themselves completely, totally blind to a brand new threat that was gathering far away in Europe. And that threat was galvanized by Pope Urban II. The source imparts how his infamous speech sparked the Crusades. He promised that, quote, "Any Christian who joins this holy war, his past sins will be forgiven and he will go straight to heaven." This religious framing motivated a massive, totally unprecedented European mobilization aimed directly at a fractured Middle East. And the result of that mobilization, it was devastating. The source presents a staggering, grim statistic, an estimated 100,000. That is the number of Muslims, and we're talking scholars, women, and children, massacred by the Crusaders when they breached Jerusalem in 1099. The account also highlights that the Crusaders showed no mercy to the city's Jewish citizens either, tragically burning them alive inside their own temple. Moving to Section 3, the Hashashin threat, shadows in the night. Before we see how the Muslim world recovered, the source takes a really fascinating detour into a terrifying internal threat. You might know them as the Assassins. They were highly trained covert operatives operating under the influence of hashish, which is actually where the word assassin comes from. They thrived on the existing chaos, systematically murdering Muslim generals and even caliphs just to keep the whole region destabilized. I mean, they generated absolute paranoia. Imagine waking up to find a warning dagger planted right next to your head while you slept. They were a literal nightmare that plagued the region until they were eventually wiped out years later by Genghis Khan. Amidst all this internal terror, we enter Section 4, the rise of Salahuddin Ayyubi, the unifier. This source introduces Salahuddin so dramatically. He's born in exile, initially viewed as a literal curse by his own father, but destined to be a king. As he grew up, he was deeply influenced by the reigning sultan, Nur-ad-Din Zangi. And this story brilliantly illustrates Nur-ad-Din's absolute conviction. He commissioned a stunning, intricately carved wooden minbar, a pulpit, specifically to be placed in the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. The catch? He hadn't even conquered Jerusalem yet. Talk about confidence. This piece of historical foreshadowing firmly planted the seed of a unified, liberated Jerusalem in young Salahuddin's mind. Following Nur-ad-Din's death, Saladin's ascent was just incredibly rapid. He conquered Egypt alongside his uncle, becoming its governor at just 32. When Nur-ad-Din's empire threatened to collapse into total civil war, Nur-ad-Din's widow actually wrote to Saladin, pleading with him to intervene. He marched on Damascus and, remarkably, took the capital without shedding a drop of blood at age 37. To achieve his ultimate goal, he made a huge strategic move. He signed a temporary truce with the Crusaders, knowing for sure he first needed to unite the fractured Muslim empires under one single banner.
And that unity sets the perfect stage for Section 5, the Battle of Hattin, the Desert Trap.
So that temporary truce we just mentioned, it was shattered when Reynold of Chatillon attacked a pilgrim caravan that actually included Saladin's own sister. This was the final straw. But instead of attacking the fortified Crusader strongholds, Saladin's tactical genius forced them to come to him. And this brilliantly illustrates his strategy. Step 1. He lured the massive Crusader army out into the scorching July desert. Step 2. He positioned his own rested forces right in front of the only available water source. Step 3. As the Crusaders pushed forward, literally dying of thirst, Saladin encircled them and set the dry desert brush on fire. The smoke and the heat completely broke the Crusader army.
The aftermath of this battle is the stuff of legend. The Crusader king and Reynold were brought before Saladin. Seeing the king parched, Saladin handed him a cup of iced water. Now, in the culture of the time, offering a captive food or drink was an absolute royal guarantee of safety. The king drank and then handed the cup over to Reynold. While Saladin immediately clarified he had not offered the water to Reynold, there was no pardon for the man who mocked the prophet. Fulfilling his earlier vow, Saladin personally executed Reynold while sparing the Crusader king.
With the Crusader army completely decimated, we reach Section 6, Jerusalem retaken and legacy. This cycle completes. Saladin marched right on Jerusalem, where the defending Crusader commander Balian sent a chilling threat. Grant us safe quarter, or we will burn Jerusalem and the Al-Aqsa Mosque to the ground. To save the city, Saladin agreed to terms. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the high contrast moral framing the source explicitly uses to compare the two conquests. Back in 1099, the Crusaders massacred the citizens, burned the temples, and turned Al-Aqsa into a stable. But in 1187, Saladin pardoned the Christians, famously using his own personal gold to buy the freedom of captives who couldn't pay the ransom, and he finally restored Al-Aqsa, placing his mentor Nur-Din's minbar exactly where it was always meant to go. Saladin would go on to successfully defend Jerusalem against the massive Third Crusade led by Richard the Lionheart. Yet, despite being the most powerful ruler in the world, you have to look at his wealth at the time of his death shortly after. It's staggering. 1 gold coin, 47 silver coins, 0 properties. He literally gave everything away. A really stark reminder from this source that true legacy, at least in this history, wasn't built on personal wealth.
But history, as the source repeatedly points out, is cyclical. Jumping to the modern era, the source maps out the loss of unity once again. In 1918, the Ottoman Empire lost World War I. The source notes this highly poignant moment in 1920 when a victorious French general reportedly visited Saladin's grave, kicked it, and declared, "We are back." This was followed by the establishment of Israel in 1948. The source even points to rhetoric in 2001 when U.S. President George W. Bush momentarily used the word crusade to describe the war on terror, highlighting how these deep historical echoes continue to resonate loudly today.
So what does this all mean? That brings us to the final, really provocative thought posed by the historical narrative we've explored today. The source argues that internal division always precedes the loss of the region, and unity precedes its return. With the region having experienced decades of modern division, the question it leaves us with is this: are we merely in the middle of another long cyclical shadow of this epic history? And will that 1,000-year cycle eventually repeat itself? It is an absolutely fascinating lens through which to view history, and it for sure leaves you wanting to learn more.